And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFL round review. And like I did last year, I will start this the way I did last year, and I thought this was perfect, lest we forget. To those Anzacs, again, thank you for your service. And joining me, which I think is kind of perfect because this man is a veteran from over here in the States. So it is kind of a perfect situation for a veteran type of round to talk with a veteran, though a U.S. veteran, not an Australian veteran, but I cannot wait. Mr. Craig Wessels, the Yank on the footy. Craig, it is great to see you, sir.
Thank you, Donnie. I appreciate the opportunity to sit down and chat with you again. I love when we get together, and I think the last time we talked was during our fantasy football draft, which
Mhm.
I'm shocked that things are going as well as they are right now. I could be undefeated had I just put Brody Grundy in one game instead of DeConing. No, or DeConing in one of the two. I lost by 31 points,
Mhm.
and the one I didn't play scored 32 more points than the other one.
Yep.
So
And the
it's,
funniest part about it is last week you and I went up, and if I'd have stuck Bontempelli in instead of Levi Ashcroft, I'd have beat you.
yeah,
That's
yeah. It
I
was
literally I was sitting there kicking myself because it was the first week Bontempelli comes back and he puts up 117, and Levi Ashcroft had 60, and I lost to you by like 20 or something.
hmm
So it was the same exact
So,
same thing. So the fun part about fantasy footy sometimes is that happens. So, but
so
we're not here to talk
yeah.
fantasy footy, but
Well, but
I'll let you
one thing
continue.
though, my guess, Bontempelli is not likely to be finding himself on your bench anytime in the near future.
Nope, he's
Okay,
right on there. He was my captain this week, though. He was
there
a
you
little
go.
low since they decided to give him a little bit of a rest since that game against GWS wasn't exactly as difficult as I think they originally thought it would be. But
Yeah.
we'll talk about that just a
Yep.
little bit later. Let's
Yep.
jump right into it, sir. Thoughts on this round? Because, like I said, the Anzac round is one of my favorites because this is such a cool initiative. The Anzac Day game is so fantastic. The silence of 100,000 at the G for the Collingwood Essendon game. It is both creepy but so cool. And we were treated to some great footy. Was it the most competitive round of footy? No. But
No.
I will say this though. There were some great results, some spice, some blowouts, some fun, and definitely some talking points. So your thoughts on this
Yeah.
round?
Well, first of all, the whole idea of the Anzac round, which I really think it is extraordinarily well done. Uh, to I'm going to kind of make some comparisons to the stuff that the NFL does, which I don't want to say that the NFL seems to come off as a little bit more patronizing, but I just think that the NFL, there's a lot of lip service with a lot of things that the NFL does.
Hmm.
Now again, the NFL draft just was this past weekend. And if you bet the over on how long it was going to take Shador Sanders to get drafted, you won. And I think I'm thrilled because we got one hell of a lottery ticket there. If he turns out to be what he thinks he is, we may have hit a jackpot for a very small price. But um, I find the way that they honor the men and women who have served, with the Australian and the New Zealand military, is the reverence
Hmm.
is phenomenal. And I think it has to do with scale because again, the size of the military in Australia and New Zealand, it is significantly smaller. Ratio wise, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I think it might even be smaller ratio wise than what we would have here in the United States. But it's just it's a beautiful ceremony. Um, and just as you said, the respect that is shown to the men and women who have been in combat who did not come back is phenomenal. And if you don't mind, I mentioned I have a friend that lives up in a few hours now west of Brisbane. He used to live on Russell Island, which is right off the coast of Brisbane, and he moved about 4 hours inland about 2 years ago. And he started a tradition about 20 years ago. And I kind of told the story about him in my last preview episode, um, regarding an Australian World War I sniper by the name of Billy Singh,
Mhm.
who I've seen different numbers where he had a confirmed number of between like 150 and 200 kills at Gallipoli. And this gentleman was treated with reverence for everything that he'd done. He was very well respected, but you know he died almost penniless back in, I believe, 1947. But he has a memorial obelisk at the cemetery, and my friend Orville, uh, like the last 20 years, Orville would travel to the cemetery. It was a much shorter drive than it is now. It's like 4 hours each way now for him. But he goes to the cemetery Anzac Eve and polishes the obelisk, replaces the Australian flag there. Oop, I just banged my trash can there. Sorry about that. That's going to make your things
I
jump there a little
I
bit.
don't think I heard it actually, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So
But I heard it. And he actually sleeps graveside, Anzac Eve. And it's just, and this is a gentleman who's in his 70s. He's not a spring chicken by any stretch of the imagination. And to me, I had him on the podcast and I talk to him all the time. To me, he's also an Australian military hero for some of the things that
Mhm.
he and I have discussed as well. And in the episodes that I had him on, he talked about that a little bit. But I think it's awesome that they are sharing the respect for these people. And I just love being able to share Billy Singh's story with people who may not have heard of him before. And you can look online and find all kinds of information about him. And I put links to it was my last preview episode. I think it was the round seven preview. There's several websites that I linked to in the show notes for that. If you want to read about him a little bit and what his adventures were. But just yeah, absolutely phenomenal. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think that just the pageantry of it is tremendous.
Mhm. Agree, 100% agree on that. So let's jump to the footy. Again, this is such a fantastic round. Again, I've told many a friend up here. I've explained it to some of the friends that I have, and just that the respect is just absolutely magnificent to see that. So let's jump right into it. We'll jump to Friday. We'll jump to Thursday night footy, and as we kind of set off, Mike, was this
Uh-huh.
the game that we really wanted for a Thursday night footy for Anzac Eve? No, but
Well,
it's footy.
yeah,
You gotta
yeah,
try to enjoy it as much as you can. As the Melbourne Demons get a 20-point win, 83-63. It's almost kind of interesting that Simon Goodwin has kind of really had this epiphany of handball footy, and it is working. Surprisingly,
yeah,
I I wasn't sure if it would work, especially you drop Van Rooyen, you drop Fritsch. Fritsch comes back this week due to the
yeah,
injury, but they found a way to make it work. But
yeah.
I have to
Oh,
say this. I know they lost by 20, but darn, it's fun to watch this Richmond Tigers team
oh,
because
absolutely.
they've got some mongrel in them and they've got some get after it because they were told this entire offseason, is this team going to win a game? Is this team going to be wooden spoon? They have come in, they have kicked the door down, and they have said, damn it, we may not win a lot of games, but we are going to play our tails off
Yeah,
for 80 minutes. It
yeah,
is fantastic to watch this Richmond side, but
yeah.
Melbourne got what they needed to do.
Well, when we saw the fixture and we after like round six and we realized, okay, this is who we've got in the first game. A lot of people talk about, sitting around watching paint dry. I think a lot of people thought this was gonna be like watching paint spill. Uh, it's paint dry because this was not going to be a pretty game, and it wasn't exactly. It was a hard game to watch, but you're
Mhm,
exactly right. Richmond is is a club that is just they're feeling their oats, and they've got just enough veterans that still remember hoisting that cup to just
mhm,
kind of whisper into these kids' ears, this is what it was like for us when things went well. And uh and I'm not saying they're going to be winning a cup in the next couple of years, but I will tell you they're going to make some clubs sweat this year.
mhm,
Okay, as you said, they may not win a lot of games, but when you play Richmond, you're going to earn that win. Look at Gold Coast last week.
mhm,
The week before. They came in and I think many of us probably tipped Gold Coast to come in, you know, despite the fact, Dimma loves being at Marvel Stadium.
I laughed so
Um,
hard.
I have to tip my cap to Richmond, and I've talked to several Richmond supporters who, were very, I said, I told them, I said, yes, you had, what was it, like a 37-year gap between premierships or something along
Mhm.
those lines. And I said, I can't guarantee, first of all, 37 years from now, I'm going to be worm poop. Um, but I said, I don't think the gap between when you win your next premiership and now is going to be anywhere near that long.
Mhm.
Um, but it's just this club is playing hard. These kids are, I will safely say that, I tipped them as being one of the two clubs that did not have any shot at playing finals this year. I basically eliminated them. I put them and West Coast down at 17 and 18.
Mhm.
I said they're going to be there. I thought both of them are going to play hard. Um, you mentioned Melbourne as well, and I got to applaud Goodwin for sitting Van Ruin and sitting Fritsch. To me, Bailey Fritsch is a bit of a black hole when the ball comes to him. I don't, I haven't looked, but has Bailey Fritsch ever actually had a goal assist in his career? Has he ever? He's
I think he's had a few, but he
okay.
does he does sometimes get tunnel vision when the ball goes into his hands. There's sometimes that he has tunnel vision, so I
Yeah,
can see that argument.
he did not have one against Richmond, but but
Proving
yeah,
your
it's
point.
like it's kind of like there used to be an NBA player, Lloyd, he changed his name to World Be Free, and they kind of referred to him
Mhm.
as the black hole. The ball went in, but it never came back out. And it didn't matter where he was on the floor, he was shooting it. Um, but I applaud Goodwin for having the courage to because let's be honest, he's in many ways he's coaching for his job.
Mhm.
Um, and to send down, arguably his two of his best forwards because this club is really struggling to score goals. And then they went out and had some success with them not there. And as you said, Fritz kind of came back in as a result of an injury.
Mhm.
Um, does he go back out this week again? I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with that because
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to reward him for them having gotten this win against Richmond, or do you want to send him back down and say, I'm still not happy with X, Y, and Z, and you need to work on this down at the VFL before you get to make another appearance up with us.
Yeah, it'd definitely be interesting. I know Hawthorne did that with Jack Ginnivan, and that I think
Hmm.
that really reset him. The other thing too, you got to give Melbourne a little bit of credit is Keziah Pickett has come in from his suspension and has been
Yeah,
playing
yeah,
electric football. I mean,
yep.
he's that new style center midfield forward that kind of they're into center bounces and then they shift forward, causing some defensive structures to get thrown off because if the midfielder doesn't pass it to a defender, all sorts of heck happens. So
Hmm.
I got again. I'm fascinated with this because Max Gone is starting to kind of recatch his powers that he had, which is great because I love Max to death. I think Max is
Yeah.
an incredible human being and I love him to death. But I just kind of feel like for the longest time until these last couple of games, Simon Goodwin was still holding on to 2021, where he thinks contested footy is the only thing to win, and footy really has changed since the man on the mark rule,
Hmm.
the stand rule basically has come in. It has completely changed footy from a contested beast game to a much more wide open. As so many of the announcers said this week, the halfback flank, the really good kick halfbacking flanker is really gold in this particular style of football. And that's just not something Melbourne really has. They have Jake Bowie and they have Salem, but are they damaging by foot? No, there's still some things. I know Trent Rivers has rent through there a little bit, but I think he's shifting towards the midfield. This is just a Melbourne team. I'm not 100% sold on them. I want to
Yeah.
see, can they have this type of performance against a Collingwood? Can they have this type of performance against a Brisbane or a GWS? If you have this type of performance, then I'll say Melbourne's back. But I'm still kind of holding my cards a little up to my chest on Melbourne because again, Clayton Oliver, I've never been huge with him. I think he's a butcher. I think way too many times he gets the ball and he just kicks it. I don't think he really is really good at hitting targets. I think Petraka is a little bit like with your beloved Cats, like danger. I think he's almost more dangerous in that striker hybrid role, go through midfield,
Hmm.
go forward type of role. I think he's much more damaging there. But again, I'm not sure how Goodwin is handling it because Viney has been down. They haven't had the midfield production that they have had years before. Now, Gaughan's playing better, so that helps. But I wanna move to the next one because again, the Anzac game is always so much fun. But I want to talk about this because I found this hilarious. Somebody pointed this out in a podcast. I listened to it, and it really is. It's almost kind of an oxymoron, but it's hilarious. That one of the oldest teams in the league when it comes to average age
Yeah.
was captained by their youngest captain since like the 40s. And
Yeah.
Nick Dacos captaining the Collingwood Magpies and helping his Pies get a 41-point win over the Essendon Bombers, 107-66. I just found that particular statistic funny because everybody's been talking oldest team, oldest team, oldest team. And then this particular round, they start one of the youngest captains they've had in like 50 years.
Right. Right.
It was just insane. But I will give my plaudits to the Pies. They look magnificent
Yeah.
right now. They
Yeah.
look like they did in 2023 when they won the whole thing. And if they keep this up, it is going to be hard not to see them being around in September at that time.
Right. Right. And I did not have them playing finals this year. Because I thought Father Time was going to catch up with them.
Are you pulling the Geelong card on a team?
Yes, I am. I
The too
absolutely
old, too
am.
slow?
Well, hey, you know what? If people are going to pull it on Geelong, and then yeah, I figured turnabout is
I'm
fair
sorry,
play
I
there.
had to. I'm
That's
sorry, I
okay.
had to.
And I quite frankly, I hope they get way too old and way too slow this week because if the Cats play this week like they did last week, they're going to lose by 50 at least to the Magpies.
Oh man, it's just really,
But
really, it's
but yeah,
really man.
and I can't remember who it was, I'll be honest, I don't remember if it was this round or the previous round that it just to me it was not a good look. It was the Brisbane game. The Nick Dacos, stomping on Jared Berry.
Mhm.
He stomped on his foot I think, two or three times right in a row, which to me, that I'm going to use a technical term here. That's pretty chicken shit, if you ask
Mhm.
me. You're too good of a player to
Yep.
have to resort to that kind of stuff. You don't need to play bully ball or intimidation stuff. This isn't, the 1989 grand final. Let's see if we can give you a collapsed lung and knock you out of the game on the first bounce kind of thing.
Well, Zach
You know,
Bailey sure had an opportunity. That's probably the hardest hit I've ever seen Nick Dacos take.
yeah, yeah.
I will say that. I know we're bouncing back from the week before. The one thing that I'm gonna say this when it comes to the Bombers is that I'm still just not 100. I'm still just I don't know. They're an enigma that I just cannot figure out because one week they look fantastic and their ball mood is great. They look good, but there's still just so many deficiencies on their back half that I worry that this is going to be an up and down season for the black and red again because I don't know what's their best footy because as soon as I think they've got it figured out, there's deficiencies and they get eaten up alive by a Collingwood Magpie. Again, the Pies are playing
No,
fantastic football right
I'm,
now.
I think there's a couple things that you can attribute this to. One this week again, you know, and again, Todd Goldstein had 38 hitouts. He's still very serviceable. The man
Hmm.
knows how to play. He can roll out of bed and have 30 hitouts. He's been doing this so long. But I
Yep.
think, missing the energy of Sam Draper,
Yep.
um, and I'm waiting for the league to call North Melbourne and tell them that they're going to strip North Melbourne. I don't even remember who the player was that they got to take with that comp pick for Ben Mackay, but that they're going to strip that player from North Melbourne's roster and put them back into the draft in 2025. Because I'll tell you what, Ben Mackay, could probably, have a second career as a traffic cone. I mean, he is. I think Essendon
Which
is,
which is
as you
hats as they
said,
say sometimes say down there.
yeah, which is as you said, they're struggling to stop people defensively, and I think you could say the same thing with his former club.
Hmm.
Not to say that he would have been making the difference for them if he was still there. I'm not sure, but God, he is really scuffled.
Yep. Yep. And he's not getting much help either because
No,
it's
no,
just
he's not.
it's a constant rotation. And unfortunately, his half back line is so offensively threatened that their defensive abilities are like I love Mason Redmond. I think he's great kicking the ball, but he is a defensive liability when the ball is at midfield and into his own defensive 52, which
Hmm.
is difficult because Mackay was brought in to be that centerpiece for that potential for Essendon to get off this laundry of when are they going to win a final? When are they going to do it? And it's like, if this performances keep happening, let's chalk another 365 days because it's going to be a while, and which
Yeah.
is really difficult because you see you see you love Zach Merritt. I mean, Zach Merritt is a heart and soul type of guy. I love the guy to death. I would take him on the Swans, and I know you'd take him on the Cats any day of the week because that's just how that good that young man is.
Yeah.
But man, do you feel sorry for him because he's just not getting any help because he's doing everything he possibly can. I mean, he is putting his guts on the line and it's just
Hmm.
not enough. And it's very, very frustrating. Again, that is a great Pies performance. Again, I think Dan McStay went down with an injury. We'll have to see how that goes. I don't think it's an ACL, but another injury is always interesting how Fly McRae will handle that. But again, the Pies are absolutely humming right now. Let's jump out to Optus Stadium where this was one of the shockers. This was one of the shockers is the Fremantle Dockers get an impressive 18-point win over the Adelaide Crows, 85-67. And man, this is a Dockers team. It's a little bit like Port Adelaide. As soon as I think I've got them figured out, they have a performance that completely throws me for a
Yeah.
loop because
Yeah.
this is a Crows team that can put up points and put up points big time. Now, last
Right.
week that
Right.
didn't happen against GWS. That was a defensive game, which I found fascinating between two offensively good teams played a defensive game. I thought that was fascinating. But again, the Crows have trouble kicking goals. I know Riley Hillthorpe had that nasty finger injury. I'm still not
Yep.
sure
Yep.
if it was a break or a dislocation or both. I'm not 100% sure. The pictures were quite gruesome that I did see. But man, I gotta tip my cap. I loved this performance from the Dockers because I think this is what everybody thinks they can be, and this is without Luke Jackson. So I gotta say, tip of the cap to Longmuir on this one because he found a way to get a nice scalp. Do we have questions over Adelaide? That'll be the biggest thing. Your thoughts on this game?
Well, I think I actually think I did tip Adelaide to win this one as well.
I did too. I did too.
Because I just thought they were flat out going to be able to outscore them, um, because Adelaide's forward line. I think a lot of clubs would be more than willing to trade their forward structure straight up for what Adelaide's got going right now.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I as you said, no Luke Jackson, but Sean Darcy came in and did a yeoman's job in you know kind of handling the ruck pretty much exclusively. Um, but it's Fremantle to me. They once they figure out and if they can get healthy and have everybody on the same page at the same time, I think this is a club that is capable of winning the whole thing.
Hmm.
I tipped them to play in the grand final this year. Um, but and I think that they're fast, and it's a it's a club that just plays with a lot of energy. But as you said, they can get easily um, off track, and in some cases you'll find where they play down to their level of competition,
Hmm.
and they don't they yes they had a 38-point win against the Eagles, they had a 60-point 10-goal win against the Tigers, but they lost to your Swans early in the year. They beat the Bulldogs by a couple of goals. The Bulldogs were beat up. They lost
Hmm.
to the Demons. When Goodwin had made the move to pull some of those players out of their 22,
Hmm.
and I they're a bit of an enigma, and
Hmm.
I think that if they I and I have a hard time explaining them, and I just wonder
Yep.
is is do they need the coach Longmire reminds me a little bit more of a, he's almost like a university librarian. I don't when yeah, I don't know. Has there ever been any evidence of him just going in and and I'm not saying pulling a Bobby Knight and firing furniture
Chucking
across
him.
the room, but you'll have to Google that if he was the college
I saw
basketball
it.
coach at the University of Indiana, folks. Um, but does he get does he get upset about things? Um, and can I use a movie reference? The Tom Hanks film that came out a few years ago, and I'm drawing a blank, and I showed it in my film class. It was the one where they Bridge of Spies,
Hmm.
where I don't know if you've seen Bridge of Spies, but there's a Soviet spy that he's representing in on espionage charges and such, and he keeps asking the spy, well, you don't seem to be worried, you don't seem to be upset about this, and he would always say, Mark Rylance won an Academy Award, he always say, would it help? He's just this guy, just the most chill person I think I've ever seen in a film. Um, but the coach seems to be a lot like that. He doesn't get riled up, and I'm not saying that maybe that would work, but can somebody check his pulse during the game? Greg Page from the Wiggles is doing phenomenal stuff with the
Yep.
AED devices around Australia. Do they
Yep.
have one in the coach's box at Optus just in case can they just like check? Does he have an Apple Watch that's linked to something that we can see if he's actually
Hmm.
awake up there? Because he doesn't seem to get fired up.
Hmm.
And and
I
and 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 I'm not saying that that would necessarily work per se, but would it change the mentality of some players if they're thinking, well, if the coach isn't going to get upset with us, maybe we don't need to kick it into another gear.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm
Spitballing.
yeah, I'm
No,
throwing
I
spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks here. Yeah.
the funniest part about it is like I'm sitting here looking at several of these games going there's I could probably grab about five teams that are all have some kind of enigma situation where it's like
Oh
I
yeah.
don't really I
Yeah.
don't and especially this year has been extremely fascinating with how many teams like I can't put my finger on them. Like as soon as I think I've got it figured out, they're kind of like the proverbial cockroach when you turn the lights on. They scatter everywhere. You just have no
Well,
idea
yeah.
what's going
And you
on.
and you were we talked a little bit off air about are we worried about the number of blowouts that are going on
Hmm.
right now in footy? And I do have to say I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, so I'm used to blowouts. But but I I am in a way because I think that in the great grand scheme of things, we could, and I think now we could probably narrow it down to maybe 15 clubs, but a lot of clubs could theoretically find their way into playing finals, but they're just,
Hmm.
I think, as we mentioned, you're a Swan supporter. We talked a little bit off air, and we're going to get to them. We've been talking about the Demons, are they going to flip that switch and turn things around? And you've
Hmm.
seen positive things, but they're sitting at 15th on the ladder right now.
Hmm.
You know, do the Melbourne Demons have the ability to pull a Brisbane Lions of 2024 and climb up this ladder? Does that
Hmm.
club have enough talent to make that kind of an adjustment? And I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think they even know.
I mean, again, this is one of those years that I think there's too much footy for me to sit here. Like I watched the first crack and the stuff like that, and I'm already
Mhm.
starting to see Joey Montana saying like, well, we've got this many teams who I think are already ready. And I'm like, I'm sitting here going, Joey, like, dude, I don't think so. Like, I seriously, there are several teams that right now, I think if one thing changes,
Mhm.
they could be incredibly difficult to play.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'll go to the next game because there's another one in this game that I think there for a little bit we started to believe, and it got knocked back a little bit this week, and that's St. Kilda because Brisbane Lions beat the St. Kilda Saints at Marvel Stadium 118-73. But the thing that annoys me about St. Kilda is that they've teased us. They've
Mhm.
literally been that tease. Like they are the great reporter that gives you that just that littlest bit to keep you watching it. and then it never shows. And I think
Yeah.
that's the frustrating part about it is because I've seen teases this season where they've looked absolutely fantastic. And then in this game, I agree. Like, why was Lockie Neal not tagged by Marcus Windhager? Marcus Windhager has an incredible record
Yeah.
against Lockie Neal in games
Yeah.
between these two. And it was like I don't know what happened. I don't know if there was a structure thing that Ross just decided to change his mind. I don't know. Again, I'm not in the coach's box. I'm not going to presume.
Right.
But
Right.
man, did that concern me that I'm like, Marcus Windhager is your best clamp down central midfielder and one of the best midfielders in the entire competition was basically allowed to run around with
Yeah.
no adversity at all.
Yeah.
And he
Well,
had himself a field day in this game. And I know that there's some controversy about the video of him absolutely cheesing out like a 17 game kid. I know Kate McCarthy had a little bit of a go at Ross at that. And again, and I've seen some people that are trying to defend Ross, and I'm one of those that I've said this. Are there some people that will respond to a public boot in the ass?
hmm
Yes. But there are people that don't. So you do have to do a fine line.
Right. Right.
Again, I'm also one of those. Ross Lyon also made a decision that we can question, and that's he takes Hugo out and subs him off. And then subsequently, not even 20 minutes later, Mason Wood gets a concussion, and now the Saints are down an extra man. So
Yeah.
there is reason for me to question Ross doing what he did
Yeah.
because now they're down a man because he decides to make a decision that he could have just made a magnet move. He could have just
Yeah.
pulled Hugo, sit for 10 minutes on the bench. You're not going to get any rotations for the next 10 minutes. Rotate everybody else. Technically, you're down a man, but you can
hmm
eventually use him after he's
Putting
had
back
his
in. Yeah.
time
Yeah.
out, per
Yeah.
se. And your sub is still there in case somebody goes down with injury. So
Good point. Good point.
I'm 50-50 between the people. Do I understand that Ross is very old school, so he's going to do some things the way he wants to do it? Yes, and I get it because Ross has a track record for that. That's
hmm
fine. But the fact that it blows up in his face even more because not only does he get backlash from people thinking he went too hard, but then the
Yeah.
fact that Mason Wood goes down with a concussion and now they're down a man, it
Yeah.
really kind of it really kind of is it's a 50-50. It's a two-way sword sometimes with that sub. If you do it too early tactically, you can hurt yourself. And
Right.
this is
Right.
one of those situations where it happened. Was it the reason that Brisbane beat him by 45? No, but it
No.
is something that you can sit here and go, Ross may have
No.
jumped the gun just the tiniest bit, and it put his team in a disadvantage more than it actually helped kick him in the butt.
Yeah. Well, and and Brisbane, we just have to. I think we have to flat out say Brisbane is a phenomenal football team,
They are.
and if this club could very easily repeat and be hoisting the flag and hoisting the cup again this year. But you mentioned St. Kilda as being a bit of a tease, if you will, and I have to tell you, my warped mind started going to the fan dancers, and they could change the song, da 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 da.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's just it. Just again,
Uh,
you
I,
look at
I
you look at some of the people on their list, Nazaya Wanganeen Millero, which I think
yeah.
I'm interested. David King throughout the idea of can Nazaya go through the center? Would you like to see him go through the center, or at least move him up to the wing instead of off that halfback? But as I said earlier, that halfback player is so crucial to present day
hmm
footy. I'm not sure if that'd work. Plus, Nazaya is not a big kid. He's not. Can he handle the rough and tumble central midfield section? It will be the $1 million question again. Ross has got a few things he'll have to address for sure. But Brisbane just looks fantastic. Hipwood's kicking goals. You got the Ashcroft brothers playing fantastic. Kyle Lohman again, fantastic. Logan Morris is continuing to show that he's one of my favorites because the whole Macus story from last year still has me absolutely rolling with laughter that he goes to Macus and then has to play in the AFL. And he's really kind of taken his spot in the AFL and run with it, which has been magnificent. But I want to move to the next one because the next
Okay.
one, I almost more want to talk about everything that didn't happen on the field more than I do want to talk about the game because this is one of those Port Adelaide again cannot make up their mind whether they want to be a great football team or a good football team or a mediocre football team because
Yeah.
they get a 9 point win over
Yeah.
North Melbourne
Yeah.
at home.
Right. Right.
North was not fantastic in this game. Were they bad? No, I don't. I
No.
don't think they were bad. Luke Parker, 300 games again, hat tip to the former Swan. Again, I still wish he was wearing red and white, but I wish him all the best. He's been fantastic for that young midfield. But
Hmm.
man, was this game just innocuous because everything seemed to be about Jason Horn-Francis trying to kind of get back after the drama of him leaving North Melbourne, including the whole drama of him trying to walk away from Ken Hinkley and Butters and Rosie physically grabbing him to
Right,
bring
right.
him back.
Yeah.
And I almost agree with Lloydie. Is that a droppable offense? I know the kid is talented. I know the kid is a number one overall kid, but man, the disrespect to your head coach is still talking to you, and the
Right, right.
captain and one of the best
Yes.
players on your team had to pull you back.
Yeah.
Personally, as a coach, I believe Kenny Hinkley has every right to tell Jason Hunt Francis, sit your blonde butt down.
Yeah,
You're gonna go play
absolutely.
San you're gonna go
Absolutely.
play Sanfil next week. You
Hmm.
may be talented as all get out, son,
Yeah.
but that's a disrespect level I cannot handle.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think, I had, in times that I coached, football for a while and I coached baseball for many, many years. I mean, there were instances where I did that with kids
Mhm,
because of, the way that they, not necessarily what they had said to me per se, but maybe how they treated teammates or how they treated opponents. Yeah, and the respect thing I think I agree with you on that. And I'm sure he was getting a little frustrated because,
mhm,
North Melbourne was giving it to him also.
mhm,
And you know what? You just need to me, and I got on a bit of a rant with Rick Shabani about this, and
mhm,
on Messenger, that he needs to basically just take it. Okay, I know he wants to be ticked off about this, but you know what? And this is the thing that I still have a hard time wrapping my head around, and maybe people can straighten me out on this, but we've seen it happen with him. We've seen it happen with Tim Kelly. We've seen it happen with a number of players, come in to Club X for 1 year. I have to go home. We're not talking about if the AFL was in existence in 1915,
mhm,
okay, and you were from Adelaide and you got drafted by the team in Brisbane and you took the 8-day train ride across country to get to Brisbane and you somehow ended up being able to play games on the other coastline and that sort of thing and getting, teleporting, okay, beam me up, Scotty, but whatever it is, not having the ability to, to call mom on the phone, to chat or FaceTime and that sort of thing. You have those abilities, you have those luxuries right now, and quite frankly, if you're at North Melbourne and you've got a day off, theoretically you could hop on a plane and take an hour and a half flight to Adelaide, go have dinner with your friends or your parents or whatever, hop back on a flight the next morning and be back for training. And you know what, and you can talk to them every single day.
mhm,
And I guess I understand, yes, they're 18 years old, and I hate to say this, and I'm going to make a lot of people mad here, but when I see this, and I may be completely misguided in term the descriptive term here, but they seem like a bunch of mama's boys.
mhm,
It's just like, well, I have to be at home. I said, you know what? You got drafted to go play here. This is the team you're playing with for right now. I mean, if
mhm,
anything, I think that they should make the initial rookie contracts even longer
mhm.
because you invest a high pick in a kid and then they're gone 2 years later or 3 years later, and you're having to reinvent the wheel. I mean, look at what's been happening in North
Western
Melbourne the
Bull.
last few years. What's been
Mhm.
happening with West Coast? I mean,
Look at
they've
the
got,
Western Bulldogs with Jamara Ugle-Hagan this year.
yeah, which and that right there needs to be something, and I there needs to be something in the AFL where your team can just say, you know what, we're terminating the contract. We're
Mhm.
done with you. Go figure it out somewhere else. We would
Yep.
rather resort, use our resources elsewhere.
Yep.
Let us, if we got a player that doesn't do this, let us go pick up a player outside of the midseason draft, if you will, to add onto the list. Because we're already decimated with injuries, and you're deciding you'd rather go do whatever the hell you're doing instead. Go do whatever the hell you want to do then. You know, go stare at your poster of Terrence Thomas hanging up in your bedroom, you know, and say, "Wow, that's a much better approach to life, isn't it?"
No, I'm 100% with you. Again, I get it. Okay. I get that these kids are talented. I really, really do. But
Hmm.
there is something that I find fascinating about the Australian culture a little bit is that there is this weird go home factor that you don't see. And again, maybe American sports is a lot different because there's much more money. There's so much more commercial flights and everything like that. So it's so much easier to get from one part of the country to the other despite the distance.
Right,
But
right.
man, there's so many ones you go into an off season. Well, this player wants to come home. This player is feeling homesick. This player wants to go here. This player wants. There's almost so much player power. It's almost weird. Like, and the fact that the other thing that happens over here that I find fascinating when they talk about it over in Australia is the fact is that with US players, you can be traded at any time. You can be traded at
Right,
any
right.
time to the trade,
Yeah.
and it does unless you have a no trade clause, which is only in certain sports. I know NHL does, I think NFL does too. Like, unless there's a no trade clause, you can be moved. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter who you are.
Right,
And
right.
I almost think the owner, the club CEOs and the AFL really need to look into it. And I know some of the Australians are absolutely just they're face palming. We don't want our sport Americanized. I get that. But there are two things that I've said a couple of times that I think that if you do, it actually would make your product better. And that to trade players that you don't have to worry about getting permission, like make it a little bit more of these players have to earn their spot. It's not just
Hmm.
given. And then I think the ability to trade mid-season instead of a mid-season draft, have a mid-season trade period because you get a situation. This is a perfect example. Essendon is a perfect example because you have Goldie at 36
Hmm.
being your ruck
Hmm.
when you could move for a Matt Flynn or a Yvonne Soldo from Port Adelaide who are doing nothing right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, and
And
that's it.
even a few years ago, when I know Goldie was being courted by Geelong,
Hmm.
you have a mid-season trade period. North Melbourne's like, well, crap, we're not going to make the final. Hey, Geelong, would you trade your first round draft pick for this year? If granted that they have it, would
Right,
you
right.
trade your first round draft pick for this year's draft so you can have Goldie for the rest of the season? And I bet you North Melbourne would have went, yes, because we can put in a younger rookie gold because it's not going to matter. They're not going to make finals. You put in a younger ruck, which gets them development time early in
Yeah.
the season,
Yeah.
and Geelong gets a top level ruck during
Right,
the
right.
season and gives them a chance to go for a title.
Yeah.
They have to pay for it by giving up their first round draft pick. And
Right.
I get it. It's Americanized, okay? So don't kill me in the comment section, ladies and gentlemen. It's just an idea because it is a little bit different. So now that we've had our
Well,
random tangent
well,
on
and
that,
it's been and it's actually been talked about. I've seen it come up in conversation
I think it's
many,
going to
many
happen
times.
eventually.
Well, you know, and maybe and I know I've discussed this. Maybe there ends up being something where, you know, if you and I'm and where maybe if you trade someone that you then have to give them like a, I don't know, a 15% bump in their annual salary.
Mhm.
You know, so maybe if you're being traded from, say, Adelaide to Sydney, where, you know, I think the cost of living is significantly higher,
Yep.
that maybe there's something outside the
Well,
salary
they
cap.
had Cola, and then the whole
Yeah,
Lance Franklin thing happened, and then the AFL got mad because the AFL wanted him to go to GWS, and because
right,
they did, they threw a sanction on Sydney. Though technically Sydney did nothing wrong, they did not pay Lance Franklin's contract because of Cola money. No, Cola was automatically in all of these players' contracts in the first place.
right.
It's a misconception that some people have when it comes to the Lance Franklin. I've dove into it. I've talked to many Swans
Yeah,
fans. I've talked. The AFL got mad because they wanted Lance Franklin at GWS, and basically, Lance didn't want to go to a development team. He wanted to go to a team where he had a chance to win a championship and not be in the bowl of Melbourne. He called Sydney. Sydney didn't call him, and
right,
there's
right.
where a little bit of the misconception happens with that. So they did have it, and they've gotten rid of it. And I know the Sydney clubs have been saying, if you give us this, it's not going to be an advantage. it's just basically going to make it a little bit easier for us to maintain some of the talent. Now, has Sydney been able to do that? Yes. Has GWS? No. GWS has been picked apart like Swiss cheese. So many of their young stars got picked apart. Now, did they pick too many top level kids early because the AFL went here, 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 here,
Yeah.
and gave them like 15 first round draft picks? There was no way they were going to be able to afford them all.
Right, right.
So that's a little bit of a different situation, but it has been. It got taken off because of the Lance Franklin thing, and there's a lot of people that are footy fans that are in New South Wales that know that Cola was not gotten rid of because it was an advantage. It was gotten rid of because they thought that it was being used for something that it never was, which
Yeah.
so
Well,
I agree with you. I think it should come back because of the higher cost of living up in Sydney. I honestly believe it should with with certain specific things in the contract so then they know that if they do leave, that cola is gone if they go to an Adelaide, if they go to a West Coast Eagles, that it's easily
good point.
decipherable in the contracts.
It's a good point.
I think it could be done. Again, is the AFL well known for really thinking a lot of things through? Well, when it comes to their rules, I don't think so. I think sometimes they just make change for change's sake.
Shoot from the hip.
Pretty much. Nah, so
So
let's
yeah, it's yeah. I mean, not everybody can have
yeah.
cotton on contract. It's not for everybody.
All right. Let's reel it back in here. So we'll move on. Let's go up to Manuka Oval up in Canberra, where another shocker happens as the Western Bulldogs knock off the GWS Giants by 32, 113-81. The Bont and his Bulldogs, though still fighting with injury, still no Trelaw and still a couple of things. I know Sam Darcy going down, which I won't go into the hero worship that was his knee injury, which got really annoying because I thought I was about to ask some people, did Sam Darcy die? Because the way they were talking about him was like he had passed away, though he only had a
Yeah,
knee injury.
right,
So
right.
man, did the doggies look fantastic, but what's happened to the Giants? Because this was a team everybody was talking about. Flag contender, flag favorite, looking fantastic the last three games. They have been brought back to earth, and you're starting to see some vulnerabilities you didn't see early in the season.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And as you said, this is a club that a lot of people tipped and said they're going to be a top four side easily. Now, we have to still, I think we have to temper it a little bit because they lost to the Hawks by 2 goals. They lost to the Crows by 3. So I mean, they didn't exactly get blown out in either of those games. Now they lost by 5+ goals against the Bulldogs. Um,
In
so
Canberra, where they usually play really
yeah,
well.
yeah, but it's wasn't quite snowing yet, so maybe they needed to get back there. Maybe when they head back there in August, it'll be snowing when they play the Roos. Um, but it is, and I think this gets back to what we kind of talked about, that in many ways, even the clubs that are scuffling, even though West Coast hasn't won a game yet, they've played hard. Again, we're going to talk about them yet, but they've played hard against a lot of clubs. Richmond has made people's afternoons at the park a nightmare and have snagged a couple wins that people didn't think they were going to get. So, one of the things they talk about in sports here in the United States, especially in the NFL, is that P word, parity.
Hmm.
And in many ways, I think we're possibly seeing a little bit of that in the AFL because like on as the NFL, and I hate to go back to it again, but there's that line on any given Sunday,
Hmm.
a team can beat any other team unless they're the Cleveland Browns. Uh, but um, but it's we go back to and I'll go back to last year when Richmond was terrible. And I'm going to go ahead and put my hand up and say, yes, last year and you're going to hate me bringing this up, but last year when Richmond knocked off Sydney,
Hmm.
I tipped Richmond to win that game.
Yeah, I
And
remember
people
that.
thought I was nuts for having done that. And I don't know
Well,
why. I don't even remember
they got
why I
healthy.
did it.
They got healthy for that game. One of the things
Yeah.
that most people forget is Lynch was back in that game, Bolton was back in that game,
Yeah.
Grimes was back in that game. They were pretty much almost fully healthy. And then the
Right.
funny thing is, after that game, Bolton goes down, Lynch goes down. I think there was one of they lost three guys
Yeah.
from their top 22 that all went down in that game.
Right. Right.
And you could tell after that game that it really did kind of submarine on them a little bit. Plus, you started seeing guys like Hopper and Taranto kind of waved the white flag about halfway through the season, so it didn't really help. But no, I nobody saw that one coming. But I mean, when it did happen, when I remember you tipping it, and I go, I could see it because they were healthy at the time.
Yeah. You know, can we go back real quickly to the North Melbourne game? Because I had
Sure.
something I wanted to bring up that I forgot to bring up before. I did read, that Paul Curtis is heading to the tribunal tonight to
Oh
get hit
boy.
a 3 game suspension for a tackle where he took 2 steps. The guy drops to his knees and just flops forward.
Hmm.
I'm sorry. To me, yes, he got a concussion. Okay, fine. If you want to give him a week and say, hey, be more careful,
Yep.
fine. But if you're going to give him 3 weeks, I'm beginning to think if he gets to 3 weeks, I am convinced there is a closeted Richmond supporter on the tribunal that is out to screw over North Melbourne in every single possible opportunity because Richmond has their #1 pick this year. And you won't be able to
Boy.
convince me otherwise about
No, I
that.
get it. I will say this. This is what happens when you only suspend due to outcome and not
Hmm.
action. And I think
Yeah,
I've said it all year. And
yeah.
it's a thing that really, like, everybody's like, well, you can't do it on action because there's gray area. Well, yeah, you can. You can literally put in words to take away gray area, to make it black
Hmm.
or white. There's no gray area. The problem is that when you only go on this, because I saw in one of the footy shows that there was literally a tackle that was very similar. Same
Hmm.
thing happened, but no concussion, no referral, or no possible suspension
Yeah,
was even mentioned.
yeah.
It was, oh, I think it was Nick Watson on, I think it was either Ruben Jimby or one of the West Coast Eagles. And all the announcers were like, "What a great tackle!" Yada yada yada. And I kind of agreed with what one of them said. They said if Watson and Jimby are switched and Jimby does the same thing and Watson gets knocked out, Jimby's getting 3 games. That's just it is literally luck. So I understand the
Yeah.
vitriol of the North Melbourne fans because I agree. I don't like
Well,
this 3 games, no game
yeah, and
bull.
and I'm thinking that mainly because of the Jackson Archer one from earlier in the year, which to me
The
was an
Jacks,
absolute joke as
the
well.
Jackson Archer one was one of those that should have been let go, but again, they saw concussion, so they got
Yeah,
to suspend
yeah,
him. And again,
yeah.
like I said, you cannot suspend on results. You have to suspend on action. And Archer does decelerate. You can literally watch his feet.
Right.
You do not decelerate with your feet underneath you. You decelerate with your feet in front of you because you're stopping your kinetic energy.
You
He was
don't need to look at his
slowing
feet.
down.
You don't
Yeah.
need to look at his feet. You look at
Oh
the
yeah.
little GPS thing he's got in the back of his shirt
And
because
it
that's
said
going to
he
tell you that right
decelerated.
there.
Well, I'm just saying if you didn't have the
Yeah.
GPS, you could tell visual. You
Right.
could
No, you're right. You're right.
literally, as I
Yeah.
watched it, and again, everybody, I try to be as neutral when it comes to that type of stuff. Even if it would have happened to the Swans the other way around, I would have said I wouldn't suspend Jackson Archer because I think he did everything he possibly could in the situation because you're basically telling a youngster you cannot go for that football. And I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you this right now. Clarko's going to sit Jackson Archer if he doesn't. And
Right.
that's where I kind of got on Lee Montagna because during that week he said, "Well, nobody's going to get punished for pulling back." Bull, they aren't. I'm going to tell you right now, if there's a young player that's towards 22, 23 on the roster and they pull I'm not going to go for it because I'm too worried about getting suspended. I can guarantee you a first team coach is going to go omitted and they're going to bring in the guy from VFL Sample Waffle depending on what team they are. Yes, Lee, it will happen. You can't do that. You are punishing a player for literally a situation that is completely out of their control. Does Curtis
So
do everything he possibly could? That is where I'll argue. I don't think he does everything, but I also think Josh Sin also doesn't help him because Josh Sin goes to his knees in a situation he doesn't have to. Because if he
Right.
doesn't, then Curtis can turn him and
Yeah.
he doesn't
Yeah.
go face first
Well,
into
and
the
and
turf.
and if he's going to work so hard to try to hold on to the ball,
Yep.
then hold on to the ball
Yep.
because he dropped the
Yep.
ball too. I mean, and I so so you're saying Clarko's going to get upset. So this is so
Yep.
a little different than Justin Longmuir might do.
A little,
Getting back to him
just the
a
tiniest,
little
but
bit.
I'm like, but that's the point with. So it's like again, I feel for the North Melbourne Kangaroo supporters, and I feel for any supporter on any team where this is going to happen again, and it's going to happen again,
Yeah.
and it's going to
Yeah.
happen again. And the problem is the AFL cannot put the proverbial genie back in the box. Pandora's box has been opened. That
Right.
is
Right.
just the way it is.
Right.
If you tackle and that guy's head hits the ground and is suspended, you might as well check yourself in for a 3 week vacation because you're gone. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. You're not
Yeah.
going. Curtis is not going to win it because the AFL is going to say you had this, and this, whether he actually does or not. It really doesn't matter. Curtis might as well, like I said, they're going to fight it, but they're not going to win it because they're just going to show the tape. He's knocked out 3 games. Like
Yeah.
I,
And
I
it's
hate saying, and it should be. I agree. I agree with you. One game max. Say one game. Do not do that type of tackle if you possibly can. Sit for 1 week. You know what you're not supposed to do. Try to make the adjustment. Go play footy.
and you know what? To me, bring Josh Sin in and fine him. Fine him for putting himself in a position to where that concussion is going to take place.
But then they had the proverbial what are we going to victim blame here?
Well,
And I get it. I get it, but I'm more one of those is they willingly I don't think Josh Sin willingly wanted to go to his feet. I just think he got his feet trapped up and
yeah,
Curtis just caught him at the right time. It's the same
yeah,
thing with Jackson Archer and the guy that hit him. That even Archer said he wasn't mad because he got suspended. He was just upset because he literally had the worst possible situation. The guy he's going to attack the footy. The guy that was going to get to the footy gets pushed from behind and
right, right,
goes ass over tea kettle into his knee. That's just
yeah,
the way it
yeah,
goes. So
yep.
it's frustrating because I really think the MRO continues to just continues to just find a way to pee down their leg. And I hate using that term, but they just always keep finding a way to do this. They have not done anything to fix it. Again, I also put this on the AFL because I think they're trying to cover themselves for head injuries. And I think it's going to get to the point, and I don't like that I've come up with this idea, but I think eventually they're just going to make all these players sign NDAs of, hey, you could potentially get hurt. So then they won't be sued after these guys' careers are over with. Because at the point, it's the only way to keep the game from becoming touch footy, which I know most of the really old school fans don't want to see it turn into.
Yeah,
But I could see the argument. It is becoming to the point where it's very different. You're not allowed to have a footy accident. And I think that's the terrible part about it.
yeah,
As I know, there's also the fear of, well, what if you knock somebody out doing a specky mark? Are you going to get suspended for that? Which, again, if you do the specky correctly, you shouldn't knock anybody out because you should be on the back of the shoulder blades, not the actual neck and the knee and the head. So I don't think it should be a problem, but you know it's going to happen. Unfortunately, it's going to happen. Somebody's going to take a flyer. It's going to knock somebody out, and unfortunately, that's going to happen. So, let's.
and it may be the best. It may be the best mark of the year, and they're going to say, "Well, it's kind of like the Brownlow. He got suspended for that, so we're going to disqualify that as mark of the year, even though it was, dare I say, head and shoulders above all the rest,
Yeah,
mark of the year."
exactly. No, no, it's fine. But so we'll go back to it. I will rip this proverbial band-aid off as the Gold Coast Suns get a 38-point win, 117-79. But if you were tuned in at halftime, you would have not believed that this was the final score because the Swans were impressive in the first quarter. Started to kind of come back to earth a little bit with the Suns in the second, but the third and fourth quarters, the Suns went, "Let's go, ladies and gentlemen," and they absolutely bulldozed over the Swans. You are not going to hear any excuses from me. The Swans played putrid in that second half. Their center bounce defense was absolutely atrocious. Their defense was under the pump the entire game. The only nice thing was seeing Nick Blakey go forward and kick 3 goals in the span of about 8 minutes was nice. But man, was that a difficult watch after halftime. But again, all due respect to the Suns, they look absolutely incredible. Again, will they make finals? We'll really have to see because if they do, there's some talent on this list. They
Yeah,
are an
yeah.
incredibly talented side. I mean, Humphrey was incredible in this game. The bullhorn celebration, and that was kind of comical. I had to get a kick out of that. And the King brother looks absolutely magnificent up forward for them again. So many weapons. You've got Rowell, you've got Anderson, you've
Well,
got Tuke Miller, and Noble and Rioli step into this team from
yeah.
outside, and they were perfect additions.
Well, and you guys did your club did a phenomenal job, quite frankly, shutting down Matt Rowell. I mean, Matt Rowell did not,
James E. Rowbottom, man,
yeah.
that kid internally and amongst Swans fans, he is a lauded player at the
Hmm.
club because of
Yeah.
what he does, because he doesn't he's not the fancy Chad Warner. He's not the fancy Isaac Heaney. Chad Warner's another one. I'm so glad that that contract thing is over with it because you could tell he was much more like he was the season before performances
Hmm.
than he had been in the 3 or 4 previous games before that. He had been super quiet, and Isaac Heaney showed why he's an incredible talent.
Yeah.
The kid out of Newcastle, absolutely love him to death. But I mean, I can't not talk up Daniel Rioli coming up from Richmond to join them, and Jamie Noble coming up from Collingwood. They got the 2 gold pieces for I think what could be a very good Suns team come the finals if they make it, because they've got those running halfbacks with great kicks that make impacts when the footy is in hand.
Yeah. It's um, I was just, it became just a almost like a perpetual motion machine,
Mhm.
with Gold Coast. Once that first goal got kicked in the third quarter, as you said, if you came in at halftime and thought, okay, we're up by, close to 20 points, this is looking pretty good for us. And Gold Coast, again, I hate to be sledging on Justin Longmuir again. I'm going to guess Dimma probably did not go into halftime and take a Justin Longmuir approach to halftime. I've seen his press conferences. He's not even timid during his press conferences. So, uh, I, I have a feeling that they got a bit of a spray at halftime, and these guys kind of, came about to it. And it's, I, and I heard, and I'm trying to remember the other name, and we're going to get to the guy that I mentioned to you off air before we go on here. We were talking about Kane Corns, and I was watching the first up right after the Swans and Suns game had ended. I think it was actually after the Cats and Blues game had ended that they were talking about it. Um, but he had a couple things that he said. He said, are there going to be some people that are going to start maybe whispering into Jake Lloyd and Dane Rampy's ears that maybe it's time
Mhm.
to move on? And the other thing he mentioned was, is it time for Callum Mills to give up the captaincy
Mhm.
and turn it over to Isaac Heaney? And as a longtime Swan supporter, what yes, it's your show, but what is
No, I love it.
your thoughts on those things?
Well,
I know you're not a big fan of
I
his.
will say, like I said, I was just about to say, I'm like, I take a lot of stuff that King Corn says with a grain of salt because as much as he thinks he's an incredible footy mind, there are a lot of things that he just absolutely has no idea what he's talking about. Do I understand? Yes. Honestly, I think this is Dane Rampy's last season there. But honestly, if you ask most Swans fans, they don't want to see him go because when Rampy doesn't play, the defense is even more erratic than it
Hmm.
is. Melican has been fantastic coming in. I think the one thing every single media talked about was Tommy McCartan going back. He went back. He did a decent job, but again, I think it's going to take some more continuity to get him back into I'm a fullback, I'm a fullback, I'm a fullback because he's been playing forward for a good chunk of time for this season.
Right, right.
On the captaincy, I will say this. I don't want it going to Isaac Heaney, and this is a personal situation, and I know that there's probably tons of Swans fans that probably would love to see Isaac Heaney. Personally, no, I don't want it to go on Isaac Heaney because he's one of the best players on the team, and happens a lot up here in the States, and I disagree with it. Just because you're the best player on the team does not make
Hmm.
you a good leader. In fact, in my personal opinion, I think you're a crappy leader when you're the
Yeah.
best player on the team because you don't know what the average player has to do because you're super talented. You can do things the average player can't do.
Yeah.
Personally, I love that James E. Rowbottom has gotten it because I think James Rowbottom is a leader when it comes to both effort, work, defense. He does the little things. He
Hmm.
does the things that you don't always see on the stat board. He's the one that dives and keeps the ball in play. He's the one that makes 13 tackles through the midfield to try to make sure that the pressure is there. He's a communicator in center bound stoppages to make sure that their structure is correct. I love Heaney to death. Personally, I would never put the C on him or Chad Warner or Errol Goulden. I would put it on a James E. Rowbottom. I would put it on a Will Hayward. I would put it on a guy that has to work a little bit more to get what they get because they understand their role on the team.
That's a great point.
Sometimes the
That's a really
superstars
good
are
point.
not a good person to put as a captain. Now, there are some that are. There are some guys that are captain material. They're a leader. They're the best player.
Yeah.
But for me, why put the extra pressure on them to be a captain? Let them just go be them. Give it to one of those grunt guys that you know is going to do everything right, that everybody can go, look at what he's doing. So
That
that's where I
they're
would disagree with
that
that.
they're that they're behind the scenes,
Yep,
they're a great role model behind the scenes rather than
exactly.
just, rather than and this is not to say that Isaac Heaney
No, no,
doesn't
no,
work
no,
his
no.
tail off. I'm not
Agree,
saying that at
agree.
all, but this you're saying somebody that has to work because maybe they're not the most talented player, but they're gonna put in the,
Hmm.
they're gonna be the
Yep.
guy that the people who are doing the clubhouse staff, the change room
Hmm.
staffs are having to do the most work to get the grass stains out of their jumpers,
Yep.
as opposed to maybe somebody else.
Yep.
And I completely get that. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So,
Hmm.
and yeah,
And
and
when it comes to Jake Lloyd, uh, Dane Rampy, like I said, I think this is his last season. I think he
mhm,
is, and like I said, the Swans fans, there's many that don't want him to go because he does bring so much structure because of his experience. Jake Lloyd's another one of those that I think right now he's kind of a lost child because really his best position is probably wing right now because he doesn't have the speed to play defense. He's getting up there in age. Again, he's a lauded player at the club. Again, a lot of fans absolutely love Jakey Lloyd, but right now he's sitting as a lost child because he's having to play that wing role because Errol Goulden is injured. And again, I'm not making excuses, but
right, right,
is Jakey Lloyd Errol Goulden? No. Jake Lloyd does have a propension sometime of making some bad decisions, just like Justin McInerney. Justin McInerney this week was atrocious. And I think everybody can kind of see that. I'm hoping he got his crap game out now and this isn't something that lasts the rest of the season. Do I see Jakey Lloyd being moved on? We'll have to see. Again, I think it's a list management thing. I know that there's a couple of Swans Academy players that are coming up. So
mhm,
will the Swans be a little bit more aggressive when it comes to it? They just have to be careful if they cut a lot of veteran leadership like a Rampy and a Lloyd and bring in super young talent. Do they have that mid-level guy, the Melikins, the McCartans, um, the Taylor Adams that are going to stay to still have that
yeah,
veteran leadership? Because sometimes, as North Melbourne is discovering, sometimes when you cut your four best players when it comes to veteran leadership, you don't really have a backup plan. And if you can't figure out how to get that veteran leadership into young players, it takes a lot longer for them to progress than if they were to have that very welcome veteran guy telling them, "Hey, do this, 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 and this." So,
right, right, yeah, and it's and I think if some of these players do move on, I think that that Sydney, again, the injury bug has really hit Sydney hard this year. Maybe I would say probably them and the Bulldogs have probably been impacted the most by injuries this year.
mhm.
So, even if Lloyd and
Rampy,
Grampy, I'm
it's
old,
fine.
okay? So it's even if they do step aside, I mean this Sydney is not West Coast in 2020 starting a rebuild, or
Yep.
North Melbourne, whatever decade ago it was that they started their most recent rebuild. Um, yeah, I think this may be their step back year and their retool year for, this draft may be their retooling year and where they may be bringing in a couple of players to, to fill those voids. Now, I think, I think you may agree that they could certainly use some more scoring presence because especially somebody that that because yes, you're not going to replace Lance Franklin, but you have to replace that spot on the ground.
Mhm.
And do you see Blakey? Blakey is such a blazer out on the ground. I mean, is it you saw the 3 goals? You're thinking,
Yeah.
gosh, maybe if we just keep him up there, you
He's
know,
See, he's one of those where I prefer him off the halfback flanker just
yeah,
because of his kick, because he is so unpredictable. Like
right,
the
right.
funny thing is having him and Riley Bice because they're both left-footed. They both randomly go on runs, and sometimes you have no idea what the hell they're doing, and then they kick it, and you're like, "Wow, that was what you were doing." So it's it is one of those where it's like there's a Swans Academy player named Ben King who's a full forward that
Okay.
I have a feeling the Swans are they're going to match any bid for it. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if the Swans maybe max out next year's first round pick to get a few more picks into this year's draft, because it sounds like there's at least two, if not three, academy players for the Swans that are going to come
Hmm.
into this draft that are all in that top 50 picks. So
Yeah,
they're going to
yeah,
want to have some capital to be able to match.
right.
So it'll be fascinating to see how that go. Again, there's also talk of rule changes, which again just becomes a headache. But Logan McDonald is supposed to be that guy. He's been injured because of that
Yep.
ankle injury. He still hasn't been back, and then he has a setback. Armadi goes out. So really it's McLean, and Aaron Francis has been kind of the, hey, go on up forward. You kicked three
Yeah,
goals in the last
yeah,
game. Let's
yeah,
and I
exactly.
honestly I don't think Francis did a bad job. I think he actually did a fantastic job. He was a marking target with him and McLean. It was just that after that second half, they just weren't getting any, the ball wasn't coming forward. And that's and I think the Blakey move was purely on, like, we're gonna throw Francis back to kind of give us another tall, and then we're just gonna try to make their defense run when we get it in, and it worked. But I don't see it being a permanent. I just think it was a magnet move just to throw something different at the Suns to see. And like I said, he kicks 3 goals, but honestly, he's still a halfback flanker. I still
Yeah.
think that is his position.
No,
Um,
I think he's definitely, one of the better ones. I mean, and it's just, it's, but
you just gotta
this,
cut down on a few of the turnover kicks. That I think that's one of the things sometimes is that he is very aggressive, and I think he knows he's got a good left kick on him, and
yeah,
sometimes he goes for kicks that I'm just like, and if it works out, you're like, yay. If it doesn't, you're like, oh. So
yep,
it
yep,
is one of those. It's definitely that old basketball coach adage, no, 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 okay, type of
yeah.
moment. So we've
Why did you take that? Oh, that was a beautiful shot.
exactly. No. So I've ripped off my band-aid. Unfortunately, let's rip off yours, sir.
No,
Unfortunately, as
it's
we'll go to the MCG, as the Carlton Blues have a revamp of what they were a couple of seasons ago as they knock off the Cats 94-76. This was an enthralling game of football. I
yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed this game of football. It was competitive, it was tough, it was after it. But man, did the Blue Baggers get up and about, and hopefully, maybe we'll see them start to kind of be what a lot of people are expecting is potentially a finals team, potentially a top four side. They finally started to come to it. Unfortunately, it was at the expense of your beloved Cats.
Yeah, well, it's I know we're not talking fantasy here, but if you average Ben and Harry Mackay's scores together, they had an average day. Uh, but I do want, I am going to take my cat's hat off, which is not actually on. It's next to me or behind me here.
Mhm.
It's good to see him back out there
Yes, yes,
for the
yes.
game. It's for the game itself. Um, Jamar Ugle-Hagan, are you taking notes? Um, to see how it's done, you can come back and you know what? There's a spot for you on your club. You could come back and kick 3 or 4 goals, and people will go, "Hey, welcome back. Nice to see you." Um, but that's maybe the worst game the Cats have played in a long time, and it exposed. Yeah, there are a lot. To me, it exposed a lot of things, and I again, I'm not going to question Chris Scott because Chris Scott has, yesterday he forgot more about footy than I'll ever know in my lifetime.
Mhm.
Okay. But not having Brian Myers out there as kind of
Hmm.
the point guard, if you will, of
Yep.
that offense really makes them struggle. I mean, there's nobody to get that kick, that next kick out of clearance
Hmm.
in inside 50. Because he's phenomenal at distributing the ball, and I don't know if there's anybody that's better at doing that in the game. I would love to know who they are because he's really damn good at it.
Hmm.
Okay. One of the other things that I am really wondering is Tom Stewart more banged up than they're letting on?
Hmm.
Because Tom Stewart does not look like Tom Stewart right now.
Hmm.
So I think that right knee is bothering him a lot more than he's letting on. And I just a couple of the other things that I've noticed, and again, I'm tipping my cap to the Blues because they beat the Cats handily. To me, it was, the Cats were like Sisyphus. They kept getting close. They rolled the ball up the hill,
Hmm.
got really close. Son of a gun. It rolled back down the hill. They rolled it
Hmm.
back up, got it close again. Son of a
Yeah.
gun. It rolled back down the hill. It's but I'm still very um bullish is that I'm
Yep.
thinking that it's I'm bullish on Shannon Neal. I think he's gonna in a year or two I think he's gonna be a very good forward, but I'm really wondering why when he retired Tom Hawkins did not give him the remainder of his big guy sticky stuff and big guy slippery stuff,
Hmm.
because I've watched Shannon Neal drop, to me, balls that should be marks that he's able to make, that
Hmm.
that he should be making. There were two or three in this last game that I think he could have hung on to, but didn't. I don't know if he's not using the stickum stuff that they allowed him to put on the chest of their jumper and
Hmm.
that sort of thing. I don't know if he's using or not. And I like the idea that they're resting Patty Dangerfield up forward a little bit,
Yep.
kind of like the Bulldogs occasionally do
With Bond.
with Bontempelli, and
Yep.
occasionally the Demons do with Petrarca. They'll kind of rest him up there for it. And he's spending a lot of time up there. You know, yeah, Patty Dangerfield's set shots are no sure thing by any stretch of the imagination. He's gotten a little better at it, but I wonder, is his presence up there, because again he's that team captain. Is it inhibiting the effectiveness of Tyson Stengel, Brad Close? Ollie Henry has been a shell of himself
Hmm. I
since
agree.
Patty Dangerfield has gone up there. Ollie Henry is, we might as well put him on the back of a milk carton because he's gone missing.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know he was the substitute this last game, but even when he's not the sub, he's not he's not been
Hmm.
Ollie Henry where he's going to get two or three goals a game.
Yep.
He's disappeared. He's kind of deferred to Dangerfield. The
Hmm.
ball's getting to Patty Dangerfield a lot more than it used to, than Henry's getting it. So I think they're going to be okay. When Myers comes back, and day 12 of his concussion protocol is the same day as the Collingwood game. So I don't know if he's going to be cleared to play. I don't want him to rush back. Again,
Hmm.
it is a concussion. I'm going to make sure that he's all right. You know, I'm not saying rush back because I want my team to win. I want you to be healthy before you
Yep.
try to come
Agree.
back and play. But it's just, I think that him not being out there is a huge loss for them at this point in time. But again, like I said, I can't do anything else but tip my cat. Tom DeConing had a phenomenal game.
Hmm.
Um,
Nick
and
Hayes was insane in this game with his intercept marks.
yeah, yeah,
Man.
yeah.
But
It
I
is
will
a
I will give you some plaudits. You're bleeding a very good one in O'Sullivan back in the back.
Oh yeah, oh
And
yeah.
and I find it interesting. I find it interesting that I've listened to a couple of podcasts, and for any of them that are listening for the Falcon podcast, is a little bit of information that they got just the tiniest bit wrong. Is he was a top 15 draft pick, and in fact, I know a lot of Swans fans that I was talking with, and I said I would have loved to move up the draft to get him because
Hmm.
tall, athletic, reads the footy really well. He's also a New South Wales boy. There was another thing that I was kind of, but when Geelong got him, I was like, man, did they get a good one because he's tall, he's athletic, he's long, great intercept mark, great decision maker.
Yeah.
Man, you got a good one there. He's showing up. I think when Henry comes back, I think that will help. That will help Stewart a little bit in the back too. You're
No, I
just
think so. I think so. Yeah.
there's still some things that are still moving again. The Cats are a team. They're gonna be around when it
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
They're gonna have games like this. It's just gonna happen. I agree that maybe Danger needs to go maybe on the wing a little bit. Let's put Max Holmes a little bit more through the center, or maybe even Bailey Smith, just because their center midfield is where they're not getting it out of, and
Hmm.
you don't want Danger going in there too much because again he's getting up there. Father Time has
Right.
not been nice to him, and again he's a physical player. He had the
Yeah.
one where he ran through like three people just to get the football. It was insane. But he's a power athlete and he can't he's there's no way he's going to last the entire season. He's going to need breaks. He's going to need
No, and
moments.
that's
So they got to find a way to get Ollie Henry going, which I think will then get their smalls, which then will
hmm
let Shannon Neal
yeah.
become
Yeah.
the guy.
Well,
It's close. I just have a feeling it's close. And again, if the Cats can get close,
yeah.
there's a premiership opportunity for the way this team is built, the way Coach Scott coaches. It's just
Yeah.
too easy for them to do that because they are just so good. They're a smart team. They play the game the best possible way you can.
Yeah. I mean, he hasn't, for example, he has, Dangerfield hasn't played, more than 18 games, since 2020. But yeah, so they have rested him, and I know we've suspended a couple times, but they have rested him strategically, and I think in many ways they're strategically resting him up forward right now is what they're doing.
Your last premiership was because you were able to do that with Joel Selwood and Patrick
Yeah,
Dangerfield because
yeah,
you had them cherry ripe going into the finals.
yeah.
Scott knows what he's doing.
Oh yeah,
It
yeah.
may annoy people, but he knows what he's doing. He's usually 4 or 5 steps ahead when it comes to it. He's got a plan. He's going to
Yep.
execute it. Are there going to be bumps? Absolutely. But
Yeah, I'm
the
not
thing,
I'm
you just
I'm not
can't.
sitting here I'm not sitting here questioning his decisions at
Oh,
all.
I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
saying. I've
I'm
seen this tape way too many
right,
times. I've
exactly.
been
Yeah. I
keeping
mean, yeah,
track since 2009. Geelong has just been too good a club, no matter
yeah,
who's coaching it. They're just too good a club to not be there. So
yeah.
let's we'll go quickly through this last one. 50-point win. Hawks good. Eagles better. Competitive. Great. No. Again, McQualter is in a difficult situation on this. The Hawks, they get their booster. They get their booster. Chol has himself a fantastic game. Ginnivan comes back from his VFL sanction and looks pretty good. I'm interested to see again. This is a team that I think Will Day's loss is hurting them a lot more than I think Coach Mitchell wants to admit.
Hmm.
They get the easy win. Okay. West Coast is the easy win, but there's still this Will Day hole and they can't really fill it because Warple isn't that same player. McKenzie isn't that same player. They don't have it. And they need Massimo D'Ambrosio to find his form from last year because he is a little bit like Henry. He's a little bit like the milk carton. He's gone missing because he's just not the same as he was the year before. So the Hawks, fantastic. Eagles, they're growing. The Oscar Allen crap is really getting annoying right now because right now I don't know if Minnie actually wants him there because he just put him on the back and he just looked lost. He didn't look like he wanted to be there. He didn't compete. I
Yeah.
mean, I hate saying it. I think Oscar Allen's going to find himself in a new jumper next year, and that might have been a little bit of a job interview for him at Hawthorne, but fortunately, it was not a very good one.
No, and yeah, and they've got you know the Bull or the Eagles, they have, a lot of draft capital in 2025. Of course, right now they've got the number one, if the draft was held today, they've got picks 1, 15, 19, and 33.
Hmm.
So they've got the, opportunity to, to continue to build the club. But again, you're bringing in kids who have to develop, and there's people discussing, should they, should the West Coast Eagles ask for a priority pick? because they've been so bad. I mean, this is if I'm not mistaken, this is the wealthiest club in the competition in
Yep.
terms of how much money. They're kind of like the Harvard in terms of their endowment, if you
Hmm.
will, of the AFL. And I'm sure there are AFL clubs that are sitting around there going, yeah, right. You're not getting a damn thing out of us. You've been spinning your wheels here for the last few years. Just figure
And
this stuff out.
it wasn't self-inflicted. I mean,
Oh yeah,
if
yeah,
you ask anybody, it was self-inflicted. They held on to veterans they probably should have let go. They traded I mean, it really helped you out when it came to it, but the Tim Kelly trade was another just absolutely disastrous list decision that has blown up in the West Coast Eagles' face.
yeah. And it's and they've got they're still they're a very I think overall they're a young side. I mean, although they do have they've got what six players that are on the north side of 30 right now. Um, and those are all six players that that are typically playing and have played key roles for them. Yeah, I don't know if I'm an Eagle supporter, I'm not sure I'm feeling really positive about even 2026 quite frankly. I
Mhm.
think they're going to be competitive,
And you still have to
but
try to re-sign Harley Reid, who, when the Victorian bids are going to come as soon as they possibly can.
oh
So it's
yeah, yeah.
man, West Coast is in a quite the interesting situation. So, but
Yeah,
again,
absolutely.
I don't want to
Absolutely.
disrespect the Eagles. Again, there many is getting them to compete, but it's just again, there's so many holes in this team, and unfortunately, like I said, all those trades in in the Tim Kelly. I even put it at last year. I know you got Harley Reid, but honestly, if I was West Coast, I would have tried to split that pick and to get two first round picks, bring in Dan Curtin, the Western Australian who's at Adelaide, and one other one because you can build more with multiples than just one massive superstar. And I think that's where I disagree with West Coast is I think they had a chance to kind of kickstart it to get some youngsters, multiple youngsters, and they decided to take the one. And I get it. I get it. Harley Reid had all of the dusty monikers and everything like that. But it's just right now he's swimming in a kiddie pool and all he's got for friends is tadpoles. He has no help. And I think
Good
that's the
point. Yeah.
problem. That
Yeah.
really is the
That's
problem. He's the monster fish in a really
yeah.
small pond when it comes to his helpers. He just doesn't have anybody around him. Oscar Allen wants out. Liam Duggan is the other co-captain. He's playing not well. Liam Ryan's playing okay. Tim Kelly had to get sent to the waffle because he was
Yeah. Which
atrocious.
which I think was actually a good move. Again, I
It's
have no
really it
problem with
really
that.
bounced him. It really did bounce him.
Yeah.
He played
Yeah.
well in the waffle and he earned his spot back up there. But again, it's like Minnie's just in an absolutely atrocious. It's a lot like Uze. I feel bad for him because I just don't see any light at the end of the tunnel
Well,
anytime soon.
and I'm going to toss this out here right now. I'm going to
Okay.
go ahead and put on my list manager hat here right now. Okay. I'm going to put my list manager hat on here right
Sure.
now. And I'm going to say, I'm going to be the list manager at the Eagles. And I'm going to say, Harley, we love having you here, but we know that after 2026, you're likely wanting to be heading back to Victoria.
Hmm.
So we're going to go ahead and make a phone call to one of the Victorian clubs, okay, and see if maybe we can jumpstart your move back at the end of this year. What do you think about that? We're going to go ahead and call the Richmond Tigers, who have currently picks 2 and 3 in this year's draft. What do you think about playing in the black and gold? What do you think
Hmm.
about that? Would you like to do that? Do you like black and gold? Those are really pretty colors. You want to go play with Sam Lawler? I don't know if Richmond would do that, but
Honestly, I think they would.
yeah,
And I bet you if you ask most Tigers supporters, they probably would. And I honestly, if I'm West Coast, even 2-3, they're probably going to get greedy and they're probably going to want Richmond's future first, which I get
yeah.
it. They're going to ask for it. If I'm Richmond, I hold steady. I say 2-3. The max I'm going to give you is 2-3 and maybe a third rounder in this year's, maybe just because mid level guy, especially that late, you could probably get away with it. I
Or
take
if
it.
If
I'd
we're
honestly take it if I could get a top 50 if I could get a top 50 pick plus the two if I could get two, three in the top 50 pick again. Two is also debatable on how North Melbourne go right now. You can right now
right.
you'd bank on it, yes.
Yeah.
But even still, like I still think North Melbourne, the worst you're gonna get out of them is fifth. I just don't see him going much higher than that.
Yeah.
So two,
Yeah.
five, and pick 50.
And
I think I would take it if I was West Coast because
if they
that
ask
gives
for
you,
the
yep.
if they ask for Richmond's first next year, then I say, you want my first next year? Give me that. I don't know where the pick came from necessarily, but it would be 19 to be the end of the 19 would be like right now be the top pick of the second round,
Mhm.
or maybe the 33, which is they got from Hawthorne towards the end of the second round. Then maybe okay, we'll give you that first round pick in 2026, but give us that second round pick back in the deal as well.
Yeah.
So maybe we're onto something here. Maybe we need to, you know,
I'm thinking about putting it on my socials and see what West Coast fans would think.
you know what?
And what would Richmond fans be willing to move
I
North's
think I
first,
may
their first, and like I said, a late
I
second
think I
or
may toss that out there myself tonight as well. Then that's yeah. I mean
that'd be
that's a
fun.
yeah.
It's fun. It's fun to do that type of stuff. All right,
Yeah, just to, yeah.
let's move on. Is again, you and I could talk for days. This
No, I
podcast
got
could
to
be
go to
three and
bed
a
soon.
half hours.
I got to be up at 4:30.
All right, we'll get to our burning questions. We'll try to rush through. We'll try to go through this, but still give our great talk. Again, you and I could talk for days. It's always fun. We kind of discussed this a little bit right off the top with Anzac because you, sir, are a veteran of the Navy, and again, thank you
hmm
again so much for your service.
And my son's a lieutenant in the Navy right now. In
Yep,
fact, I'm flying out on Wednesday to
San
go see
Diego.
him in San Diego. He's graduating from a he got selected to go to a school that is basically in the field that he is in. It's
Hmm.
basically the equivalent of Top Gun. It was
Hmm.
a huge deal for him to get selected to this. And he graduates Friday this week. He's
Hmm.
basically done. He's got a couple little procedural things he needs to do. And I asked him when he finished up his last thing, I said, "Is this the hardest thing you've ever done?" And he basically said, "By an effing mile,
Hmm.
absolutely." So yeah, but
Oh,
it was a huge honor for him to do
well,
this. So
from everybody in the podcast, again, wish him congratulations on that, and again,
absolutely,
thank him for his service.
yeah, yeah.
But I mean, how cool is it for you as a veteran to see the reverence that veterans are given for this and for Anzac
Oh
round and the
yeah,
Anzac appeal round?
it's beautiful. It is beautiful, and I and I know that sports here they like the salute to service stuff in the NFL.
We do a
I
flyover,
yeah,
we do a
yeah,
thank you thing, and that's really about it.
yeah.
It's kind of a pat in the back, pat on the butt, thank you.
You know
I mean, I
they
hate saying it, that really is it.
the coaches wear hoodies on the sideline, with their team logo on that's camouflage.
And you get to wave the flag during the national anthem.
Yeah.
It's really about it.
Well, and occasionally people kneel when that happens, but that's which again, yeah, and we're not going to go into that. I'm going to go ahead and just shut up about that. We're going to move on to that. We're going to talk about something else then. But yeah. So, but yeah,
That was great.
it's a really neat event, and I think that the AFL does a lot of those things extraordinarily well.
Hmm.
Um, and I know some people get tired of the welcome to country stuff and such, but I as somebody who doesn't live there, I appreciate seeing it because I mean
Hmm.
I like learning about Australian culture. I find
Yep.
myself listening to you know podcasts about there's a couple of them that I listen to on occasion, like the Forgotten Australia, and there's one called Weird Crap Australia that I listen to. I mean, there's one that's called the Regional 250, which is it's a guy who lives in Geelong. He's a Brisbane supporter, but he's interviewing 250 people that live in like little small shires around Australia and just kind of talking about their communities and such. And to me, it is as a as a geography buff, I enjoy just learning about these places, as a result of that sort of thing, and I don't know if you've had Michael Gallus on your podcast or
I
not, but
have not, unfortunately.
Michael was teaching at a cattle station up in northern WA. I mean, literally in the middle of nowhere. I remember I was talking with him and he said, "Well, I have to go to the bank tomorrow. It's a 6 hour round trip." Uh, So I mean, you can't, you're literally in the middle of nowhere as far as that goes. But it's just really neat to see just the variation in culture and society there. I mean, I watch a lot of television programs that are based out of Australia. On Acorn TV has a ton of those kinds of things. So I
Mhm.
really have embraced that, and hopefully next year will be the year that I make my trip. I pushed it back a year again. With my wife's cancer diagnosis this year, I want to make sure she is healthy. Um, and quite frankly, I don't know when I'm going to be retiring from my job, because the state teacher retirement system keeps making changes to where theoretically I could retire at my full retirement next year instead of 3 years from now. They've changed it again. I've
Mhm.
not told her about that because she if I can tell you the quick story, because they changed the rules that was going to allow me to retire a year early, and I told her, I said, well, I'd be able to go a year early at 33 years instead of 34 at my full retirement. She said, well, I'll still be working. I said, in 31 years of teaching, I've worked a summer job, and I think 25 of those years.
Mhm.
And 5 of the years, I was coaching, my son's travel ball team. I said, I'm always doing something. I said, I'm not going to stop working.
Mhm.
and I said, and let's be honest, I said, I'm 4 years older than you are. You're gonna be using my pension a heck of a lot longer than I am. And she got her little deck of Uno cards out and pulled out that reverse pick four card and said, well, which one of us has cancer right now? I was like, doggone it, I'm never gonna retire.
Oh man. Oh man. But again,
Yeah.
I've said it offline, and I'll say it here for the people on the podcast again. My thoughts are with you, and with
Yeah. Well,
that
thank you.
again,
Thank you.
unfortunately, I just lost my mother to cancer
I'm
recently
sorry.
last
Yeah.
year. So I know, unfortunately, what that disgusting disease can do with it. So we kind of, my next question was going to be about the bloods. And we kind of discussed that just a little bit. So I think I'm going to hop over that and let you have another Cats fan moment here, because I'm going to ask you this, sir. As the Cats man that you are, what are your thoughts? Are there any worries about this? Because personally, like I kind of said at the end of our covering that, I'm not worried about the Cats, because this is just, it's the Cats under Coach Scott. They're gonna be there when they need to be.
No, you know what we have, this is kind of like, and I don't know if you have gotten to the point in time in your life where you're old enough to have bifocals as of yet.
Not yet.
Okay, but
I'm
they're
crossing my
coming. They're
finger. I'm
coming. Okay,
crossing my
I
fingers that
I
it won't come, but I
I
I
I
know
mean,
potentially in the future.
I have mine right now. So I see the close up, and you see a game
Hmm.
like Carlton, and you get worried in the close up. But then you look at the out of the top of the lenses, and which is where the distance is. And I've had, I remember the eye doctor saying, well, you can get one contact lens that's for up close and one that's for far away. And I'm thinking, I'd be walking in circles. I mean, I don't know how that would work, but as you said, long distance projecting towards, in September of 2025, are they going to be a top four side? I don't know. But if they get in, they've got as good a shot at, they've got as good a shot as anybody to win
Mhm.
if they stay healthy, if they get
Yep.
healthy. Again, I worry about Tom. I guess I'm worried about Tom Stewart. That's my biggest concern.
Yeah.
They've got, you've got some, you've got, Jake Kolajasny still sitting in cotton wool that has not played yet this year.
Yep.
Jack Henry's going to
Henry's
be
still
back.
hurt. Yep.
You've got Mitch Duncan who could come back in, but again,
Yep. He's
I
near
got
the
Mitch
end
Duncan.
himself.
Right. I mean, Mitch Duncan, I've got Mitch Duncan up here in the 2011, poster. He's getting up there. How much is he going to be able to contribute?
Yep.
You wonder,
No.
if at all. So and I wish him all the best. But
Mhm.
if I'm worried, it's Tom Stewart's knee is to me the biggest
Mhm.
concern. I mean, Reece Stanley has been a
He's been
breath of fresh
fantastic.
air.
He's been
He's come back
fantastic.
in and been, because it is since I've been following the game. I mean, they were looking to try to get rid of Reece Stanley when I first started following the game.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, he's not Max Gawn, he's not Nick Nui, he's not Brody Grundy, but you know what? He goes out there and competes really well. Um, they've got, a young kid that just cannot stay healthy that may be coming in. Dempsey, I think is his last name. And then they've got a young kid by the name of James Edwards, who I think they just brought in this year that they're pretty high on. But again, you're not going to have a first year ruck that's going to come in and really, make any kind of difference, I don't think.
Mhm.
But it's So looking at it from the bifocals, I'm concerned. You know, you get concerned in the short term. I mean, this week, I know I'm not supposed to tip against my own side. I'm hopeful that they can beat Collingwood. I hope that they rebound this week, but I'm not going to be shocked if they don't.
Yep.
But
No.
because I look at their fixture and I see what are the prospects of the end of the season. Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, the end of their fixture actually does not look. There's some easier games if you want to say that towards the end of the season. I mean, they close out. They've got the Tigers. They play the Swans, but I think the Swans are going to get it healthy. They've got Essendon. They've got the Roos. They've got the Saints towards they've got the Tigers twice in the between 20th of June and the 23rd of August. They play the Tigers twice. They're going to have to earn them, but in theory, maybe those youngsters are going to be tired out at that point in
Mhm.
time.
Yep.
Knock
No.
on wood.
Yeah.
So
No.
yeah, so I'm concerned in the short term, but not in the long term.
No, I
Yeah.
completely, like I said, I look at Coach Scott at the helm. We're also only 7 rounds into the season, so
Right, right.
there's a long there's a
Yeah.
we're right around that 33%, the 1/3 of the way through the year. But again, that means there's still over 60% left, still a lot of time for Coach Scott to weave his magic. Now we're gonna adjust this because you and I get to talking and time just melts away. I'm looking at my clock. My wife is looking at me through our door. I think she's starting to get hungry. So she can't see any of this. So we're going to jump. I normally would do team of the week and power rankings, but I'm going to skip those this week because again,
It's
I
okay.
just loved this conversation. I just didn't
Yeah.
want to stop it. It was so much fun. So we will jump just to tipping.
Collingwood's the best team in the comp right now, which surprises the hell out of me. There we go. We did it.
If anybody wants to see the team of the week, please reach out onto my socials, and I will get that out to you. But let's jump to the tips because I know it's always fun, especially earlier in the week. And I know you and I joked about this off mic. Thursday night footy,
Yeah.
Essendon v North. Okay, this is I get it. They pick these games early in the season. They're really hoping, but man, is this a flattener? I'm hoping this is
Okay.
competitive. I'm gonna tip Essendon. But come on, North, you got to have a
I'm
good
gonna
performance in this
I'm going to tip with a caveat.
one. Shoot.
Okay. If Paul Curtis does not get hosed by the tribunal and they send him home and say, okay, you know what? We're going to go ahead and nip it in the bud right here. We're going to pull a Barney Fife. If Paul Curtis plays, I'm going with North Melbourne to win this one.
Mhm.
Okay.
And if Curtis doesn't play, you'll tip Essendon.
You know what? I'm going to still go with North Melbourne to win it.
I'm gonna tip Essendon. I guess I'm hoping I'm hoping it's a competitive game.
Yeah.
I like some of the youngsters that North has. I think they're progressing. It's just they're just not getting any help because their midfielders are so young. They don't know the structures defensively, and it's really exposing the lack of super talented back Aiden Core and some of the ones in the back. Just they're just not up to what everything that they had to deal with. So an
Yeah.
interesting one, Friday night footy, a fun one at Marvel Stadium under the lid, two Enigma teams. Again, this is one I'm interested. St. Kilda, Fremantle, who do you like?
You know what? I'm going to go with, I'm not sure why. I'm going to go with Fremantle to win this one.
Okay.
Again, I have to start putting my money where my mouth was or is. I've got them playing in the grand final. I'm going to go with Fremantle to win this one. So,
I'm gonna tip the Dockers too. I think there's some Mason Wood. I think is a little bit of a hit on their wing. I'm just there's still just some things I don't like, and I think Fremantle's starting to figure it out. Shai Bolton's starting to find his feet. Dudley and Murphy have been two incredible diamonds in the rough that they've been able to play on. I think they've been playing fantastic. Their defense has looked pretty solid, and you're starting to see a slimmer Sean Darcy start to find his way now that he doesn't have the mass that he used to. He's starting to figure it out. I like the Dockers as well in this one. Fun one, Mars Stadium in Ballarat, always a fun one. Duggies v Port Adelaide. I'm going to tip the Duggies because Port, I don't know what I'm
right,
getting.
right.
Am I
Nope.
getting good Port? Am I getting you know what Port? I don't know. I at least know that the Bulldogs are playing good football despite the
Yes.
injuries. Bont is back. They always play Ballarat really, really well. Tipping the
Well,
doggies in this one.
we're early on this because we don't know if Jason Horn Francis is going to be playing this week. Okay,
I
because
honestly, I
per our
honestly
discussion,
think he'll play,
yeah, I think he probably will too. But I'm going to go with the
which is
Bulldogs as
annoying.
well.
Which
Because
is annoying.
I think, and I'm going to jump out of the tips and go back into them here in a second. I think right now, Luke Beveridge is in the leader on the leaderboard right now for Coach of the Year.
Agree.
Okay, but if the Suns win a final, then I think Dimma is going to get it.
Yep. Yep. I could see
So,
that. I could
yeah,
definitely see that.
yep.
Or whoever wins the minor premiership usually is a top candidate in that as well. But I don't know. I don't know what port is. The Bulldogs have at least been somewhat consistent, on that. So I'm gonna tip the doggies in this. But this one has got me intrigued because this one could be an absolute blast.
Yeah,
Adelaide
yeah,
Oval,
yep.
Adelaide v Carlton. Do we get fantastic Carlton? And do we get very good at home Adelaide? If so, this is going to be a titanic matchup. Who do you like?
I'm going with Adelaide simply because it's at home.
Mhm.
If this was being played at Marvel or at the MCG, I'd go with Carlton, but I'm gonna go with Adelaide to win this one at home. I think that they're gonna not let themselves play a game like they just did. Okay, so yeah,
You and I are reading each other's minds right now because I'm the same way. At home at
yeah,
Adelaide, Carlton going on the road. Sometimes you get a little bit of a fall down after a big win and a big win against the Cats. Sometimes you see a little bit of a letdown in the next one. Adelaide coming off a less than stellar performance. Sometimes you get it, you get the jump. I like the Crows in this one. Fun one for you, sir. Head versus heart. MCG, Collingwood v your mighty Cats. I'll ask you this, sir. Head or heart? Cats, pies, who do you like?
in Chris we trust. I think he's gonna find a way to get it done. I think he's gonna find a way to get done. I think that um I just have a funny feeling that Max Holmes is going to know how many hairs are on the back of Nick Dacos's neck by the time the game is over. Okay, I think he's going to have counted them. He's going to count how many hairs are growing out of his ears. Is every knuckle on his left hand have hair on each knuckle or not?
Hmm.
He's gonna. I'm going with the Cats on this. I I just have a feeling they're going to bounce back and it's going to be a huge game. Did we forget Melbourne and West Coast, or are we just glossing
No,
over that one?
that's
That's
the
the next
next
one.
one.
Okay,
I'm
okay,
going off the website, and that one's next since they're both playing at the
okay,
same time, which is
okay.
really annoying when the AFL does that. So we'll get to that. I'm going to pull out an old Gene Hackman line from Hoosiers. Is that agreeing with Max Holmes is he's going to know what type of gum that Nick
Yeah,
Dacos is chewing if he
yeah,
chews his gum. I want to know what flavor it is.
yeah,
the,
exactly.
the
Yeah.
the 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 iconic line from Hoosiers is still one of my favorite lines of all time. Is that I want at the end of the game I want to know what kind of flavors you chewing and literally at the end when the kid files out he asks him and he says spearmint. He actually knew it. It's still one of my favorite parts about that
Yeah.
movie. So
Yep.
now I'm going to tip the pies, but if it was one of those if I had to tip an upset, this is where I see it because
Yeah.
pies they are notorious sometimes for these games where they look really good, they look really good,
Yeah.
and then they have that stinker right in the center. And
Yep.
this is a Cats team again, as you said, in Scott we trust. This is the games he finds ways to pull something out of a body cavity, and I think he can do it. I'm gonna tip the pies. I'm gonna play it safe, but I agree with you. I think the Cats are very much in this. I think that this one could be game of the round. Optus Stadium, West Coast v Melbourne on at the same time. Gonna tip Melbourne. Melbourne
Me too.
starting to play better.
Me
Love
too.
West Coast. They'll be competitive. Could potentially be Minnie's chance because you go on the road sometimes. How does Max go on handle that long road trip? But I still think the D's just a little bit too good in this one.
Well, I think they're going to let him sit in the first class seat and stretch his legs as much as possible.
All
Yeah.
right, a fun one about 6 weeks ago, I think a lot of people would have been really intrigued by this game, but this game has lost a lot of bit of momentum as both teams are coming in with losing streaks at the
Hmm.
SCG as Sydney take on their cross city rivals, the GWS Giants. I will tip this one the Sydney Derby, not the Battle of the Bridge, because as I'm told from my Swans fans that live in Sydney, there is no bridge between the two teams, so they don't know what bridge that people were talking about. The
Yeah.
Sydney Derby. I'm going to tip the Giants. It's only because it seems like whenever the Giants come into the SCG needing a win, somehow they find a way to do it. The
Yeah.
Swans, and I saw the statistic. If the Swans win, they win it big. If the game is close, the Giants win it. And the way the Swans have been playing with the injury issues, I think the Giants find a way to bounce back. I hate saying it as the Swan supporter, but I'm doing it. I'm doing the tip against, so that if I lose it, even though I missed the tip, my team wins. So
Well,
tipping the Giants in this one.
I'm going to disagree with you here. I'm going with your club to win this one at home. Okay, I don't know why I'm doing it. Maybe just to be contrary, but I we saw a very good first half out of them
Yep.
against Gold Coast, and I'm going to guess that.
Can I give you one statistic that might make you think about it?
Go ahead.
They've played 3 games at home this year and lost all three.
I know they have. I know they have.
That's the
They've
only
played
one.
they've played some pretty decent teams if I'm not mistaken at their
Hawthorne,
place.
Brisbane, and Port Adelaide have been the 3 previous home games.
Yeah,
Again,
and they
all
lost.
teams on their best day should make finals. So I
Yeah, well,
agree
and
with you on that.
let's just go ahead and put it out there. Those 3 games at the SCG that they've lost to the SCG, they've lost 3 games by a total of 32 points.
Yep.
Okay, and the Hawks were the first one, and the Hawks were the darlings coming in this year. Everybody was picking them. They were the the avant-garde pick to win the premiership this year.
Yep.
Lions just squeaked by. Port just squeaked by 8. I think they're going to defend their ground well or better. Um, and I think they're going to win a close one here. I really do. I be,
For my sake, I hope so, because
no, I
I
know.
know
Yeah.
Ross is going to give me so much crap if GWS wins. It's always the fun part.
Yeah.
Producer Ross, again, if you're listening to it, love you, buddy. I absolutely love you to death, and I know this is always a fun one for him and I, because
Yeah.
the crap talk starts. We have fun with it. I know Rick Shambani's another one that I have fun with
Yep.
as a
Yep.
GWS supporter. Again, I love them both. Great gentlemen. GWS fans. I always have fun with it, because as much as they want to make it, as much as they want to make the rivalry, this hatred, I honestly respect what the Giants are doing, because I know it's very hard in the western part of Sydney, which is very much rugby country. I
Yeah.
want them to be successful, just not when they play this one. So
Right. Right.
go on that. We'll go back down to the MCG, a fun one, as the Hawks take on those pesky Richmond Tigers. I'm fascinated by this one, because this is another one where could Hawthorn be ripe for an upset?
Could be. Could be. I they lost two out of the last three. They came back and they beat the Eagles, which
Mhm.
I got to be honest, they should just reach out to the Globetrotters and have them send the Washington General uniforms to them. I mean, they look just like jumpers anyway. They could always sew the little GPS thing into the back and have the buckets of confetti and such, and throw them into the stands. But you know, I I think I'm going Hawthorne on this one, but I will not be shocked if Richmond makes this a close game.
Yep.
I will not be shocked if this game is decided by less than 10 points.
I agree. 100% agree.
Yeah.
Tipping Hawks, but Richmond, I love what Ooze is doing. The biggest thing will be end of third quarter. What's the score? If Richmond is down more than 3 goals, it's over. If
Yeah,
they are
that's
down less than 3 goals, Richmond's in it with a chance. I will say
right,
that.
right,
That
right.
third quarter, if you can get that pressure and keep it within 3 goals, if it
Yeah.
extends anything more than that, then I think Richmond, I don't know if they have the firepower to catch up, but if they can keep it within 2 goals, then they're on and up and about. And the last one, the fun one, the Gab is going to
Hmm.
be packed to the rafters. Queensland footy getting after it.
Yep.
2v3 on the ladder. Brisbane,
Yep.
Gold Coast. I'm tipping the Suns. I know this is nuts, but I'm going to tip the Suns on this one, because what I saw this weekend and what I
Yep.
saw against
Yep.
Brisbane earlier in the year, if Tuke Miller can take Lockie Neal out of the game and kind of make the other midfielders have to hurt them,
Hmm.
and with the damaging abilities of Noble and Rioli off the halfback flank, making guys like Cameron have to play defense, I
Yeah.
think the Suns
Which
could be very scarily close into this game. I'm going to tip the Suns. I know the Lions are at home. They play the Gabba really well, but I like what the Suns are doing
yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
They're playing really good football. They're coming
Yep.
up against a Brisbane team that I think they're ripe for it. This would be a beautiful game of football. Cannot wait to see this game at the Gabba.
Yeah, I think I'll be home. 'Cause that's a Sunday morning game here, I think. I
4:20
really
a.m. our time, at least
Yeah,
my
so
time,
5:20 so
5:20 your
5:20,
time.
yeah.
Yep.
So my flight gets back into Cleveland at about 10 after 9. So I'll be home by probably 11 o'clock. So I'll be able to get a couple of hours sleep. I'm gonna try. I think I'll be able to download the Cats game on my phone to watch it on the plane. Um, on the way back, I'll be able to hopefully do that in the airport. But I'm going with Gold Coast as well. I think this is going to be their. I think this is going to be the game where the folks that have really not paid attention yet to what Gold Coast has done are going to get up and open up their papers on Monday morning and go, "Holy crap! Look
Mhm.
what Gold Coast did to Brisbane."
Yep.
It's gonna be kind of like Jack Nicholson's "Here's Johnny" moment.
Pretty much,
They're gonna
yeah.
come in and they're just gonna make their presence known. And I think that if they win this one, I think we can safely say this club is likely going to be playing finals.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah,
Unless
because they're going
unless
to.
a massive amount of injuries, I am
Well, yeah,
100%
yeah,
with you.
exactly. Because I mean, they're looking at they're at a point in time right now where they've only got the one loss. I mean, they're 5-1. They'd be 6-1. You've got to win. You figure worst case scenario, you've got to have 12 wins to make finals, maybe
Yep.
13. So you'd have to win
And
set.
they have that weird game in hand after round 24 with Essendon because of Cyclone Alfred, which is gonna
Yeah. Well,
that's gonna be a talking point this entire season is because is it gonna be relevant to play because it's going to affect who gets what place in the finals. It's going to be a fun talking point, but it is one of those where technically Gold Coast for pretty much the entire year, along with Essendon, are going to have one less game on their legs than every team in the competition.
yeah, yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the 2 weeks after this because they've got the Bulldogs and Hawthorn going up to Darwin.
Hmm.
And the Bulldog, having been the a supporter of a club that got to go up there last year and just get absolutely decimated by them in Darwin, I know that's not necessarily a fun place for these clubs to play. So it's they've got they got the Lions, Bulldogs, Hawks, Saints, Dockers, and then the Cats coming up. I mean they've got a gauntlet to run through here, but I think they're gonna I think they could. I may just go ahead and jump ahead and say if everybody stays healthy, I think they're going to win their next 4 in a row.
Wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't
Yeah,
surprise me a
I think
bit.
they'll beat Hawthorn. I think they'll beat the Bulldogs. Of course, then the Bulldogs here are going to shock everybody. So there we go. I think we
Bulldog,
agreed on all but two.
yeah, yeah. No, it's kind of crazy, but I man, this is always so much fun, Craig. I know you and I are so similar. We love talking footy. It's a little bit. I know Rick Shaibani and I have the same problem. As I hit record and I look at my clock and I go, holy crap, where'd
Well,
time go?
and
Because we just
that's
have so much fun talking. This is incredible. Again, so I want to give you this opportunity. I love the podcast. I think your podcast is fantastic. You take it in your own way. You do you, and I absolutely love it. So for those that haven't listened, that are the audience of mine, tell them a little bit about Yank on the Footy, what you do, and how are
well,
things going on the podcast? Because I know life has not exactly been great for you, but again, still putting out great content.
it's been I do as many there's a handful of us here in the U.S. The brothers in California with Americans talking footy. We all love this game. I love the interview aspect of it, and it's unfortunately it's it's been the thing I've had the hardest time setting up
Mhm.
recently. With my wife's illness, I started feeling sorry for myself, about things, and I kind of got a little wayward. And I've actually been, working on the nuts and bolts of a completely separate non-sports podcast also idea that I'll mention to you off air, and then we'll let your wife get dinner. But it's I love, I'll do my tips each week and I'll try to do a little bit of a review. I try to, bring in some humor. AFL from LA does a phenomenal, phenomenal job with
She's
that.
fantastic. I want to talk with
Cindy
Cindy.
does
I've
a
reached out with her.
yeah.
She's fantastic.
Cindy does a phenomenal job with her. I mean, I'm a one man show. I'm a I'm doing it on a a shoestring budget. I'll record on Zoom, and I'm just I've got I'm recording in a closet here, or even some of the things I've been doing lately. I've been recording while I'm out for a walk, and just recording right on my phone, and then downloading the
Hmm.
video and audio that way. But yeah, I really enjoy doing the interviews and exploring, aspects of the game from, the local level, which I just think is really neat to be able to tell those stories, all the way up to, I've had the opportunity to talk to some, people who, a couple premiership players here and there, people have been involved, club presidents, which I'm, still shocked, Kate Roffey, when she got her job that she doesn't have
Hmm.
anymore. I reached out to just congratulating and you said, I'd love to talk to you about what it does. And the next day I've got an email back from her. When do you want to sit down to talk?
Hmm.
They win the premiership, a year later. I send her an email congratulating her. I get a response back saying thank you
Hmm.
the next day. I mean, I'm not even a Demon supporter, and she took a couple minutes, so I,
Yep.
but I love learning more about the game because
Hmm.
I'm never going to be so bold, as to say that I know more about the game, a game that people have been following for 40 or 50 years.
Yep.
I'm not, I'm still learning things, as I go along, and I still
Hmm.
have to decipher things, and I really pay attention to, some of the different announcers who tell the story, that that I'm still, learning, the different aspects of, the ins and outs of things. Again, I've never seen a game in person. I've never played the game. I was too old to do that when I first started following it. So, um, you had the opportunity as a coach to see the game in person and such. I mean, I've watched games, you know, at ground level, but I've never seen it, in person from an elevated area other than what they show you on TV. But yeah, I try to have fun with that. I like I said, I enjoy engaging with people about the game, and my interviews. There's always a kernel of footy, but then we go into all sorts of different things.
Hmm.
And because the people are interesting, and I want to know why they love footy, but then I want to know about them as well.
Hmm.
And sometimes, as you said, interviews, we're pushing close to 2 hours right now.
Hmm.
Some of mine go that long as well. Um, and let's hope there's two or three people that are actually hearing me say this at the end of this episode, because we'll know when your stats come out on YouTube when you go, and ain't nobody got time for that.
Very much
but
true.
you know,
No.
but yeah, I enjoy it, and it's I like I said, I kind of got a little wayward for a couple of months in the off season, but I'm trying to get back. I get refocused. I've made some connections. I know you have a huge interview coming up here very soon, which I'm thrilled for you to have gotten that one. I just I've not reached out to a lot of people like that as of yet. Now, although I did early on when I had Ricky Nixon on the podcast, like
Hmm.
episode 20,
Yep.
you know, and when he came on, he was really reluctant to. Um, and I had heard, and I had only been following the game for a couple of years at that time, and I knew all of the stories that had been associated with him. So he thought, well, he's going to want to rehash that. We did, we talked about everything except that.
Kept it. Yep.
And when we got done, he said, I've never had anybody ask me those questions before. I appreciate it.
Hmm.
And, so that was where I realized that, what, I might have just this little tiny niche that I can carve out of this.
Yep.
I'm not, I don't get huge numbers. If, each episode, if after a month, if I've got 200 downloads of an episode, I'm ecstatic,
Hmm.
you know, because they don't always get to that point.
Hmm.
I mean, my marketing budget is zero. Uh, you know,
My
the time
marketing
that I
budget
have.
is my free time when I actually have the opportunity to.
Exactly,
It's the
exactly.
same thing
Which,
with, it's the same thing with me.
yeah. So, we're all trying to, promote one another where we can. Um, and, we're just, we're trying to, we're trying to let people know here. And I think you have the same goal that I do, is to try to convince people to live in here in the United States that this is the greatest game on the planet. And if you
Mhm.
haven't checked it out, you owe it to yourself to do so.
Yep.
And I've got one iron in the fire that I'm waiting to hear back on that I'm really anxious about. That I think is going to be a good interview if I actually can get it set up. Which I'll mention to you off air because it's not been confirmed yet. But yeah, so there you go. That's a little bit about it. A yankonthefooty.com. You can find everything. I've got, several hundred interviews, people from all aspects of the game
Mhm.
and a lot of great stories to tell. I mean, I even had a bard on my podcast recently, a guy who's a storyteller. I haven't put it up on
Mhm.
YouTube yet, but the audio is out on the podcast channel. Have not had time to put the YouTube video out yet.
Yeah, you've had some fantastic ones. I know Danny Marshall, the U.S. Woman who got to
Yeah.
play in the U.S. The AFLW was
Who's
fan.
expecting her first child right
Yeah,
now.
I saw
Yeah.
that. So I think that is a perfect way to end it again. Again, I absolutely love it again. We love footy. We as Americans, we're crazy. You kind of have to be to love this sport and to podcast about it. But you know what?
Yep.
The love that we get sometimes from some of the people that appreciate the work that we put in is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that is going to do it for this episode of Donnie's Disposals. Again, if you like what you are listening to on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And again, keep an eye out. I know he teased an interview. Unfortunately, I just got an email from that particular guest. We're going to have to push it back a little bit. He's got to go to
Okay.
Australia, but that will happen. It is
Okay.
going to happen. And for those that did guess, yes, it is Paul Roos. And I cannot wait to have that chat. I've got everything set up. We're just going to have to redo it. He had a trip to Australia. He contacted me. So unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen when it was originally scheduled, but I will get that
So
out as soon as
m-
I possibly can. I cannot wait. That's going to be a fantastic.
make sure you ask him the most important question, what it's like to share the absolute date and year of birth with a very famous Australian rules football podcaster.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So, all right. So that is going to do it for this episode of Donnie's Disposals. We will be back with more footy coverage very, very